You're listening to the Sass podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. All right, I am so excited for you to hear this conversation. My guest and I have a lot in common, and yet so much not in common. And I mean that in the sense that I have so much to learn from Sunni VonMutius. From corporate shark to spiritual mentor, Sunni has always found an unexpected path forward, gathering new tools and stories to share along the way. After her career in technology, she retired at 32 years old and became a full-time nomad for several years. Today, as an intuitive strategist and founder of Wildflower Strategy, Sunni is masterful at helping analytically minded people integrate spirituality into their daily lives and businesses. She is a certified PMP, I had to Google what that meant, project management professional, a Reiki master, and is currently pursuing ordination as a minister of metaphysics. Today, you can find her in Central Florida living with her partner and their toddler. All right, so we talk about an article that Sunni wrote for Medium.com on what her depression feels like. I mean, we really take time for much of the first half of this conversation to paint some really detailed pictures of depression. We also talk about the checklists and support systems Sunni created to self-manage depressive episodes. She also shares a little bit about her nomad life and how that prepared her for motherhood. We talk about the importance of self-awareness and how everyday tasks around the house can be meditative. So, as always, stay tuned after for my final thoughts. Here's Sunni. Hey, Sunni. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello there. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, this is going to sound funny. I was thrilled to read about what depression feels like to you because I have such a hard time talking about it in a way that I feel does it justice. And I think that it's very difficult to help those around us who don't experience it to the level that some of us do, to really get it. And I just say one more thing and I'm gonna ask you a question, but I don't know that they can ever. And so I'm always like in this tough place of, I want you to get it. I want you to feel me and validate me and understand, but I also don't believe that you necessarily can. So anyway, thrilled to read someone else's thoughts on it. Talk to me about the sunken place. What does that mean for you? How did you come up with it? Go. After my long-winded intro.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So the sunken place was created as part of the movie Get Out.
Mm-hmm.
And in it, there is a character that is hypnotized, and the hypnotizer is like, and sink. And the character goes into this black void where there's a TV screen and they can see what's happening, but they sink deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's like they're watching their life happen on a movie screen and they can't be heard. They can't move. They can't emote. They're just sitting in this chair, and in their head, their experiences of going into this sunken place.
Mhm.
And the movie has got it's a fabulous movie. It's a little intense, and it's not really about depression at all.
Mhm.
But I remember being at home watching that for the first time and pausing it and being like, oh, whoa.
Mhm.
It was the first time I'd seen a visual that felt like I've experienced that many times in my life. That is what depression feels like for me.
Mhm.
I can see the world happening, and my intellect knows how I want to be with the world around me, and yet there's a disconnect between my brain and my body and my emotions, and I don't necessarily get a say in how I respond to the world around me.
Mhm.
And for me, I'm I've got a history of wanting to be in control, right? As I think many of us can relate to,
Mhm.
right? I like to control my environment and the world around me. And so being in that space where I can't, and knowing that sometimes it hurts those around me, and knowing that it could be hurting my future, is really, it's like it piles on,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's like it piles on pile on pile. And so yeah, I've written an article that I published on medium.com, what my depression feels like. And I describe the sunken place, this experience of just not being able to impact what's happening outside of my body and how I'm responding to the world around me. That just felt like such a great visual for me.
Mhm. It's so funny you say piles on because one of the first, I think it was the first therapy session I had with my therapist like 2, almost 3 years ago now. I said to her, here's what I need you to help me with. Cause I'm sure like you go into therapy thinking you know things and thinking you're going to go to just figure out this one specific thing, just one. That's it. And, next thing you know, here we are 3 years later. But I said to her, I'm like, here's my problem. I'm a pile oner. Okay. One thing goes wrong, and then the next thing you know, I've spiraled into, and this thing is wrong, and this thing is wrong, and this happens, and that happens. And no joke, today in therapy earlier, I said to her, I'm doing the pile on thing. Yeah, we need to, okay, we gotta check in. And it's so funny that you use that phrase because yeah, it just feels like things, I don't know how else to describe them, just keep like getting put on your shoulders, put on your brain, and you keep falling lower and lower.
I mean, when I've had one really serious bout of depression as an adult. Most of my bouts with depression happened in my early 20s and my teens, right? And I've been able to self-manage it quite well. I'm very fortunate in that respect. I'm what they consider a high functioning bipolar. But my recent interaction with depression was in like 2018, 2019. And it felt like I was in the sunken place, right? So if you want to like get a visual to go with this, I'm there, I'm present in my body, but my body is not moving when I ask it to move,
Mm-hmm,
right? I'm like watching my life happen through a movie screen. So
mm-hmm.
my body is laying in a field. And then when I go to tell somebody what I'm dealing with, a football player piles on like it's a tackle, right?
Yes.
And then I call the insurance to find out how to get mental health support. And there's another football player. And then I go in and they ask me to talk about it, and they try to talk about medication and what are my, and then, and next thing I know, I have to advocate for myself so heavily to get the support
Mm-hmm.
that I need, but I can't even move my body, that I feel like I'm laying on a field underneath a whole mess of football players. And how am I ever going to get out from underneath this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And
I can
yeah.
totally relate.
And the mental health system is something I want to go back to. But before we go there, I want to, you know, in sort of self-managing this throughout your life, like how did you do that? How did you manage it?
I don't think there's like a secret recipe or anything. What worked for me is one, I felt like if I was going to be left alone with myself that much, I wanted to know myself, right? Like I wanted to be my own best friend. I wanted to like myself when the chemicals are balanced and everything is operating in my body as it should. I wanted to like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did an enormous amount of self-development work, right? And raising my own self-awareness. And that led me down a spiritual path as well. And then through that, I developed a checklist for myself, which included videos of me talking to myself, which was very uncomfortable to make because it felt really ridiculous. But I know what my triggers are. I know what my symptoms are, right? I started to look at when I was starting to feel blue or feel the clouds come in, right? It's like the clouds start to come in. And if I don't stop them, I'll go to the sunken place. I know that one of them, for example, is I retreat. I'm a pretty extroverted person. And if I find myself avoiding social situations, that's a red flag, so to speak. So I made a series of videos for myself, reminding myself that I can choose not to do this for the most part, right? Sometimes the chemicals don't let us choose.
Right.
But in my case, if I caught those red flags and I did the series of things that I know help me avoid going too deep into that space, then I was able to successfully self-manage, right? And I have recruited a group of friends. I have like 5 or 6 things that I know to do. And I have a PDF, which I've shared through that article on Medium, of my list. And I didn't link to the videos of me talking to myself because love y'all, but not that much.
And we need our own, right? It's
you need your own.
We need
you don't
our
need
own.
me pep talking.
Right.
You need,
Right.
but it's that self-awareness piece and taking the time to sort of codify, notice what happens and what I can do to combat it, and being willing to recruit people and ask for help and be vulnerable, that this is something I deal with. And when I deal with it, this is something you can do to help me. Are you willing to be on that team?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this list, you talk about this in the article, and I would love for you to talk about it here and elaborate on it. I don't have a list. I probably should. And I'm like, consider doing that after this call. But it's so hard to feel like the things that are right to do to pull yourself out, or to really like try to head it off before it hits full on, they're the hardest darn things to do. Like exercising, eating well. Like I related so much to what you said. It's like in those moments, I'm just proud of myself for eating at all. So I don't know, like, is it the videos? Is it the videos that pushes you over the edge of going like, okay, I have this list, because I'm already setting myself up, which is a limiting belief that I have right now. I can feel it, is that I'm going to have this list. I'm going to look at it and go, she's cute for writing that, like, no, not today. So what gets you over the hump? Like, is it just enough times of going through it to be like, oh, Sunny, get up? Or like, I don't know. I'm asking for myself, obviously. It's like, I know the things that I need to do, but sometimes I just don't want to. Like, I don't know how to explain it.
No, I get it. I get it. And I think that's where the list is small, right?
Okay.
It's not big things. We're not like, go to the gym and work out for half an hour. I actually pulled it up because I haven't looked at it in a while. I was like, it's probably good for me. So number 4 for me is move your body. Right. And I reminded myself that movement helps the chemicals in your brain balance. Exercise is great, but even walking helps. So I'm gentle with myself in my list, right? Go for a walk around the neighborhood, or to the mall, or to a department store, pre-pandemic stuff. Put on that YouTube Pilates video that you like. Have sex. Right.
Yes.
So there are things that are not like, it's not go to the gym, you lazy person. It's reminding myself why the walk helps.
Could see you right now. Ding, ding, ding. Such a good little soldier.
Yes. It's like, like it's not that. It's sometimes it's go get the mail. Right. The last time depression hit me hard, I lived in a condoplex where the mailbox was like 100 yards away. It was like a football field length walk.
Yeah.
And that felt huge. And I did it in my pajamas with no bra, with my slippers on. And I'm sure the neighbors all thought I was super sick or something. But you know what? I got the mail. And that was literally the biggest thing I did that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I even have for myself, DEFCON 1, call your trainer friend and schedule a session, right? If I feel like I've gone way down the deep end and I need accountability, I've got
Mm,
friends that are trainers. And if I call them and say, I haven't left the house in a few days, I'm in the dark place, I'm in the sunken place, and I need to move my body,
mm-hmm.
I know they will come to my house and
Mm.
they will invite me to go. They're not going to come over with their dumbbells and their like yoga clothes on and be like, let's get it, girl. They're going to come over and be really gentle with me. Right.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. What does it feel like for you to make that call? And was that always
Ooh,
easy to do? Yeah, no, you're already, yeah, go ahead.
no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Here's the thing I learned for myself. And this is why my number one thing is connect to community, because what I
Mm,
learned for myself is that by the time I call and tell somebody, and I admit to somebody, especially somebody outside of my super inner circle, that
mm-hmm,
I'm in the sunken place, I'm usually already crawling my way out.
mm-hmm.
Usually the first thing I'm able to do on my like, my little creepy crawly up to the edge of the abyss, the first thing I'm able to do is call a friend and say, I'm not doing so good. Can you come over and keep me company? But by the time I call them, I'm usually on the other side of it. So flipping that script for myself is something that, number one, I don't always do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So have grace with myself when I don't. And when I do, I actually came up with code words. So I've got friends that know, like, if I text you the word snuffleupagus,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a dark place. And
Mm-hmm.
that way I don't have to send a whole like vulnerable text. I just send the code word. And all I have to do is type out that one word and hit send. And that sometimes takes an enormous amount of, first I'll take a shower, but I can't make myself. Oh, maybe I'll brush my teeth first. Maybe I'll have a banana. I'll just watch one more episode of Bridgerton and then I will send the text, right? And
Yes.
then you eventually send that one word text and then somebody else knows and you're not alone anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the people that receive those texts, are they people that you have had a conversation about how it's best to respond?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because I worry about that. I think that there are people that instinctively that I would reach out to, but it's like if you respond a certain way, it's that's the last thing I want or need. What is it for
Mm-hmm.
you? What does support look like for you in sort of conversation? One thing for
Mm-hmm.
someone to come over, like that's really like that's next step. Just in the reach out process, like what does support look like for you in return?
Well, a lot of my people are not local, right? I was a nomad for a long time. So I've got chosen family and close friends all over the place. So for me, it could look like sitting on the phone and watching the same show as me,
Mm,
right? Like we just watch an episode of Friends together. And
mhm.
it's not like what's wrong, what's going, like I don't need that. If I could explain it, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Right? I just need to feel connected to another human,
Mhm.
right? And I've got friends who are really good at holding space, right? And they've been through their own mental health crises. So I have one friend that'll call and be like, I'm going to give you a list of things and you tell me which one sounds good,
Mm,
right? And
that's
she'll
good.
list off different things every time. Sometimes she's like, do you want me to tell you how amazing you are? Do you want me to tell you my favorite memory of you? Do you want me to tell you about my life and something that's really stressful for me right now to
Mhm.
distract you, right?
Mhm.
So it's cultivating those relationships with people when I feel well, and asking them when I feel well, and being
Mhm.
vulnerable when I feel well. Because when I feel well, I don't really want to talk about that part of myself,
Mhm.
right? And setting my future self up for success in case I end up there again in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I made a note and cuz yes, connection, community, that comes up a lot when you talk to people about how to cope, the best ways to cope. I interview a lot of therapists, like that is a big thing, and I'm the same. I start to retreat. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to be around people. Um and I think what is important is what I've tried to do is connect without it's almost like I know intellectually I need to connect, so I will attempt, but in that connection, I'm not actually sharing the why. So I'm connecting on something that's like surface level or not really like I'm just calling and being like, in my brain, I'm going, I need to connect because I feel depressed. But outwardly, what's coming out is just like, hey, what's up? Like, what's new? And that's few and far between that I actually get myself to do that. But it's like, that's a big distinction, is having the person on the receiving end know why you're calling and not feel like you're hiding anything, but not having to overly explain. Like, it's such a gray area and there's such fine lines, and it's can be different for everyone.
Absolutely. And for me, when I do what you were describing of like kind of that like faux
Yeah.
cheerfulness, I just end up feeling even more alone
Oh,
in
it's
the end.
awful. Yeah.
Right. And so that I know that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it has to be somebody that I've had the conversation with beforehand. And another thing for me that comes up is I don't want to be a burden.
I know. That's my
I don't
next
want to
thing.
bum
Yeah.
people out, right? Like, I don't want to
Yeah.
bring you down. You may be, it's your kid's birthday last weekend and you had a big party and I'm sure you
Right.
guys are tired. And so one of the key things for that my friends know to say to me is that I'm not a burden. You've helped me so many times. Please let me repay it. Let me contribute to your world. It makes me feel good. Right. I know the things that make me feel a little weird when I'm in a good space, but when I'm in a bad space, they make me want to cry and they break me a little bit, but in a good way, if that makes sense. It breaks me like a little crack comes through. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm able to then receive whatever they say next. So
Yeah.
it's that help remembering that I'm not a bummer and I'm not a burden.
Yeah. I think that's so important too. I love that. The you've helped me so much. Let me give it back, because when I'm in that state, I feel needy. I feel, I have a show about how mental health is real. There's nothing wrong with you for struggling. Like, I have a show saying all these things, but when that depression starts talking to me, that's what it is. It's the depression talking to me saying, what's wrong with you? Get up. There's something wrong with you. Like, you're just not strong enough, and it's gotten better. I've worked on it. But I think that's the thing, is like, even with my partner, it's like when I'm turning to him, I feel like this like drag. And it's like, yeah, and you know what? I guess I help you too. It's just different.
Well, that I want to clarify too. Like, there's a person in my life that frequently shows up when I'm, like I say, I'm moving or I'm dealing with a life challenge. I've known them for 15 years. We worked together for 2 years. The only time I see them now is when something is wrong in my life and I need help. And when they show up, they remind me of a single conversation I had with them that lasted 10 minutes and meant nothing to me, but it totally transformed the future of his career. So the way that I helped him, to me, I'm like, but that's not significant.
Yeah.
You've more than repaid that. You've helped me move myself and like 5 family members. Like, you don't owe me, dude.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to the people who are close to me, I don't get to be the judge of if I've helped them, air quotes, enough to deserve them helping me in that moment. I have to trust them to manage their own ish.
Yeah.
And if they say I've helped them, I got to trust that.
Right.
And when you're in the sunken place, that can be really hard. So I just want to acknowledge, if anybody is listening and feels like they're in that place, and I've been here for so long, I've been dealing with depression for so long, it's been so many years since I felt healthy. When's the last time I possibly made a difference for somebody? You don't know, dude.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah.
You could have made one little compliment at the exact right moment they needed a compliment, and it transformed their entire world.
Totally. Yeah. 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 It's hard to get out of your own way, when you're in that mode.
Yeah.
It's funny, actually, these little similarities I've talked a lot about on the show on how I go get my mail. I go take a walk to my mailbox, and mine is just at the end of my driveway, but there's something about it, man. It's either sun or it's rain or it's snow, and any are fine, whatever version of it is. Just getting outside for a minute is so helpful. And I don't have the code word for me, but I offered it to someone else, and it was another Sesame Street character. So that's just funny that you said
That is funny.
snuffleupagus.
I like Snuffleupagus because we never really know for sure whether or not that character was imaginary. And I never
Mhm.
really feel like I know for sure whether or not my depression is real.
Yeah, that's
Like
good.
I always feel a little bit like, for me, the way it
Right.
shows up is, am I just faking it to get out of doing something?
Yes.
I have so many things I should be doing. And here I
Yes.
am like,
Yes.
oh, it feels like I'm making it up. Like and
Yeah.
it often comes in when I'm pushing success, an edge of success for myself, right? Like I'm on the edge of a new level of
Mm,
success in my business, or the edge
mm,
of a new level of expansion of my spirituality. And then I find myself in a state of depression. I'm like, okay, girl,
yeah.
like, right. So
Yeah.
that's where Snuffleupagus really like aligns for me, because it's also kind of like a little subliminal reminder for myself.
I love that. Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if it's real or not. They were a fantastic character,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 Have you read or thought about that point? Why is that? Because I feel that as well. Right before a breakthrough, there's like this downward spiral. Like, what is that about? What do you think that's about?
So I am a big fan of Carolyn Mace and her work in archetypes.
Okay.
And she suggests that's like a whole nother conversation, but she
I'm sure.
suggests that
Yeah.
we all share 4 key archetypes, one of which is the saboteur.
Mm.
And so my experience is that it's probably one of 2 things, or both of them, right? One of them is that my saboteur is coming up and is trying to protect me from being in a new state of existence, which success would bring,
Mhm.
right? And or that the way I've been pushing myself physically to get to that level of success has put my hormones or my physical nervous system in a state of imbalance that has allowed the chemicals in that brain of mine to get a little out of whack.
Mhm.
Right. I
Okay.
think it's really important not to lose track of the science, right?
Okay.
For a lot of us, depression is physically an imbalance in our head,
Mhm.
right? But if it consistently comes with an action, for me, it makes me wonder if I've pushed myself too hard and I'm not hydrated. My nervous system is in a state of overdrive. My hormones have maybe gotten imbalanced because I'm not, feeding myself and taking care of myself the right way. And that's
Yeah.
like the perfect storm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my
That's
saboteur is showing
interesting.
up.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's reminding me, and she's not the only one to say it, but she's someone I listen to frequently, is Caroline Leaf, Dr. Caroline Leaf. She talks about um, how depression and anxiety, like, she's a neuroscientist, and she's like, they're signals. It's your brain signaling you, it's your body signaling you that something's off, something's out of whack. And that, yeah, that fits. It all fits. People who are very smart study these things and they try to help us. How does depression come into play for you, if it does, in now motherhood? Did you experience
Yeah.
postpartum? How do you deal with still having to parent and be in a depressive state? Like, how do you cope with that? What does it look like for you?
So my kiddo is 20 months old, right? So between 1.5, 2 years old. So I'm still figuring that out.
Mhm.
Um, I knew going into pregnancy as a journey, and I'm an older first time mom. I will be 40 in a few days.
Nice.
Um,
Happy
so
birthday.
thank you. The Going into the pregnancy journey, I had a lot of agreements with my partner and my parents and my support system of how we were going to navigate what they call the 4th trimester, which is the first 3 months after birth, when postpartum is most likely, because postpartum runs in my family.
Mm,
Being diagnosed as bipolar and dealing with depression, it was pretty much inevitable I was going to have some version of it to deal with.
mhm,
And so we had a lot of pre-existing agreements in place to help me navigate that. I
mm,
wasn't alone a whole lot. My partner and I both took the first 3 months off because we own our own businesses and we are privileged to be able to do that. So we did.
mhm,
And it still showed up.
mhm,
Right. And people told me, it's funny because even as I go to say this, I feel shame about it, which is why I want to say it, because I don't feel like there should be shame.
mhm,
There doesn't need to be shame, right? People say that postpartum comes with thoughts of harming yourself or your child.
mhm,
And what that showed up for me was I would have these like horrible visions of dropping my child and seeing them like splattered and bloody on the
mm.
floor.
Mm-hmm.
Or like I was trimming the Christmas tree 20 feet away from the kid with some shears. And I
Mm-hmm.
imagined, what if I dropped them and I stabbed my kid through the arm? Like they
Mm-hmm.
were very graphic, like horror movie type images. And I'm not a person who enjoys horror movies. So I don't have a lot of those images to pull from.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like a horrible person. I was like, this can't be what they meant. This can't be, I must be a sociopath. And
Mm-hmm.
they say like thinking that you might harm your child, they mean like feeding them the wrong milk or something, right? Like they can't mean this.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
told my doula what I was experiencing, and she was like, "Oh, that's classic postpartum." Well, I could have used some clearer examples, friend.
Right, 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 right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I totally dealt with it, and it's really tricky. And I feel like at 20 months in now, I still feel like I'm on the edge a lot.
Mm.
I feel like I am constantly. I haven't actually pulled up my list, which is funny because in my head, post up until this moment, I'm noticing right now in this conversation that in my head, postpartum was different than depression.
Mm-hmm.
So it had not occurred to me to pull up my depression list because this is postpartum, but really,
Mm-hmm.
really,
That's
right?
funny. That's really
Right. So
interesting.
I'm
Yeah.
grateful for this conversation and the reminder that I have these self-care techniques.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I'm always on the edge, and there's been many countless mornings that the only reason I get out of bed is because the kiddo needs me.
Yeah.
And after an hour or two of playing with the kiddo and making sure their needs are met, then by virtue of taking care of my needs, it's like a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
And halfway through the day, I'm doing much better and I feel much better. And there's days where I call a family member and are like, I just need to binge watch some TV and have some me time or I might lose it.
Mm-hmm. How often do you do that?
And take a day off.
Yeah.
I think I've done it maybe 4 or 5 times
Okay.
since the end of the fourth trimester. So maybe
Okay.
4 or 5 times in like 18 months.
Okay. I just like, for me and for new moms listening, you know, that's one of the things that I've really struggled with and what I've really tried to like deep dive on this show about self-care and is I know that if I heard that a year or two ago, I would have been like, A, there's no way I could ever do that. And B, she must be doing that all the time. And I don't get it. Like I just would have put that projection out onto you because it would have been so far from something I felt like I could accomplish that it would become yet another thing that I'm not able to do. And so I just want to get clarity that it's still hard. It's still hard. There's still a lot of days where you're not able to do that. You're not doing that. Like it's wonderful. And I think major that you actually do it because I'm 4 years into motherhood and I don't know that I've ever done that once. But, I think it's also good to be realistic about it, especially in this world of social media and everything looking perfect all the time. And yeah, I just want to like take maybe some new moms off the ledge of like, this isn't a once a week thing that you're just like
No.
vegging out on the couch.
No. Yeah, no, it's every few months.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it looks like me binge watching TV and actually folding the laundry.
Mhm.
So I don't have that perpetual pile of clean clothes for once. And the dirty clothes are right next to it. And sometimes they blend together, right?
Mhm.
Or actually washing the pots and pans properly because the dishwasher never quite gets, those little things that
Yeah.
like drive me a little nuts. We have a pool and I don't often get to enjoy it as an adult because I have to take the kid with me. So sometimes I'll use that day to sit in the pool and actually clean it properly. Right. I do productive things often too, but they're the kind of productive things that make me feel better in my space.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't get to do it often.
Yeah.
I probably could more often if I really needed to or wanted to, but it doesn't feel like that in the moment, know?
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to do, especially if it's like I'm really fortunate that I have a great childcare team around me. But they already come a couple times a week and then calling them for an extra day.
Right. It's like, no, I've already used this privilege. Yeah.
Especially when it's a family member and it's a favor, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
You have your life and you have a job and you have your own responsibilities and I'm over, like, it feels like a back to that burden. Conversation. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And my kids stink and adorable and everybody loves them and they want to come play with them and they're grateful for the extra time and they want me to be taken care of. I just don't feel like that in the moment all of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a self-proclaimed, your words, not mine, older new mom, first time
I am.
mom,
It's all good.
and having talked about having done a lot of self-development work prior to this experience, what do you make of that? Like, do you feel like you were set up for success in certain ways? There were areas that you still have yet to explore. Like, my self-development journey has come from motherhood. It's having a human and going, oh, okay, what's going on here? Who am I? Who are you? What are we supposed to do? And I just wonder if, having done a lot of work on yourself beforehand, what the implications were of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought a lot about that, right? So I feel like first I'll say I think that the statements people make are true. You just never are prepared.
Mm-hmm.
You're never ready. You're never prepared. And that, it just happens when it happens and you adapt no matter how much you think you're prepared. I'll tell you, when I'm getting off the floor with my 30-pound toddler, I wish I was younger. This is why people do this when they're young. So there's that. But when it comes to like navigating the communication, my partner and I are both now 40-ish. We've been best friends for 25 plus years, which you'd think would be a perk, but in some ways it means we got a lot of old patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's got a double-edged sword type vibe. There's a lot of ways in which we are able to navigate and negotiate
Mm-hmm.
parenting that we at the end of a debate, right? We don't fight so much as we debate. So like at the end of one of our debates, we'll look at each other and be like, can you imagine trying to do this 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Like we wouldn't have had the tools, we wouldn't have had the skills, we wouldn't have had the awareness, we wouldn't have had the habits and the patterns broken and built. And so I don't know, because I didn't do the parenting thing
Mm-hmm.
in my 20s and early 30s like a lot of people do. But I can say that for me, having been on the journey I've been on, I feel like I'm able to be more present with my kid than I would have, because I've already done so much of the things I wanted to do. I have a lot of friends who are like, when my kid's 18, I'm free and I'm going to do all these cool things. Well, I've already done a lot of the cool things, so I don't feel that
Yes.
pressure.
Yes.
And I feel like I feel really clear. For me, I feel very clear that my kid chose me. So it feels like I was ordained to do this in this moment. And
Mm-hmm.
so whatever happens in the world around us, I'm like, well, you chose this path, dude. So it must be what's right for you. All I'm here is to
I
put
love that.
bumpers.
Yes, I love that.
I'm just making bumpers so you don't get crazy on us, right?
Yes.
Stay within the lanes, don't go wild.
Yeah.
But I don't
That's
know that
good.
I would have felt as confident in that when I was
Mm-hmm.
younger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I am very clear and confident in our parenting style and what we're committed to and what feels correct for us, because I've had so much exposure to so many different parts of the country and the world through my travels. And so I feel like it's the right time, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always the right time when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's my
Mm-hmm.
personal belief system anyway.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Yeah, I feel like now having, like I said, having kids, having like sparked this whole self-development journey for me. Yeah, that's a lot of the push and pull is sitting down, pretending I'm a fireman, doing a truck, wanting to be over here in this other part of my brain, in my other part of the world, building a business and being creative. And it's having to center myself every day on this is the priority at this moment. In another moment, it's another priority. And it's challenging. You've had a very full life from what I've read. Like, you've traveled, you've seen all 50 states, you've traveled the world, you've built a business. What sticks out to you as being some of the most impactful moments that help you navigate motherhood now?
I spent a year of my travels driving around the US, um, staying with people, bartering for a living. And really, I basically earned about 90 to 100,000 in goods and services
Wow.
and only like 3,000 in cash. Right. So
Wow.
like I really tried not to play in the space of money. But what that taught me is the intrinsic value of humans,
Mm,
right? And the intrinsic value of energy play and how we feed each other. And it doesn't, energy, money is just one form of energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the other thing that taught me is, in order to be with some of the people that I interacted with, because the other thing I did, because I'm a glutton for experience, I purposely stayed with people that had extreme values, because I wanted to demystify the they, right? Oh,
Interesting.
they think this, they
Yes.
want that, they. I wanted to meet they, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to be really present. I had to be very present in my body in that moment. One, to keep myself safe, and two, to consistently moderate myself to not judge them, because that was my commitment. Is I wanted to see the humanity in them. And if I'm over here judging them and thinking about how I would combat or debate what their point, like, that's not who I wanted to be in that moment. I wanted to be present and get to know this human being in front of me and see them for how they wanted to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes up with my kid all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, my kid is still nonverbal and has very big feelings. And I feel like I could be in front of my kid or in front of any number of people I met along my travels, when I have to just be with them and like, how can we express these big feelings?
Mm-hmm.
What else could we do right now? Oh, you're hurting yourself at this point, so let's stop, right? But I have to stay present in that moment, because if I get frustrated, it's just going to accelerate their experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that year, especially, I mean, all of my travels over decades, but especially that 1 year of road tripping, which at the end of it was the first time I started to get the poke from the soul that is now my child, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it feels pretty like full
Aligned.
circle, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But it's that ability to be present.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm. Any advice for someone who's not going to take a road trip around the US to discover these things? Like, what are some other ways that someone could tap into the learnings and the energy that you experienced on that trip?
I think meditation is an amazing tool. However, I think that we as a culture have gotten a little wrapped up in the definition of meditation,
Okay.
and it can look a lot of different ways. There's codified meditation, there's different modalities of meditation, sure, and I honor all of those and I practice many of them. But as a starting point, especially for somebody who's a parent and really looking to build the muscle of being present,
Mhm.
doing your laundry can be meditative. If you focus all of your energy, when possible, if the kid is awake, you can't, but if the kid is asleep, while you're doing the laundry, think about what memories you created in those clothes. Think about where they maybe came from. If they were hand-me-downs, what memories were created then before they got to you. Think about how grateful you are that you have the resources to have those clothes. Think about the resources that it took to wash them and where they came from, and how excited you are. I have a brand new washer and it sings to me and it is amazing. And I make sure that I spend my laundry time having gratitude for our ability to have very fancy washer and dryer, right?
Mhm.
Doing the dishes, right? The
Mhm.
meal that was eaten off of those and how it nourished your family and where the food came from and where the dishes came from. Maybe they're hand-me-downs, right? Every task around your house can become meditative. We
Mhm.
think meditation looks like the person sitting, crisscross applesauce with their hands on their knees, and it doesn't.
Mhm.
It does not have to look like that. And that's all practicing the ability to be present. Some people call it mindfulness. Some people, there's lots of different words for it. But in my experience, when I'm able to just be present to my kid and what their needs are and what they want,
Mhm.
I have so much more fun being a mom. We
Yeah.
discovered early on that night times were hard when we fought the kid.
Mm.
Sometimes the kid's just not ready to go to bed,
Right.
right? And you just
Right.
got to let them play it out for another half hour. And I could
Right.
spend that half hour with the kid screaming and crying and resisting,
Mhm.
or I can just sit down and play trucks with them and make them run the ball back and forth. And then they go to
Mhm.
bed with a dream. But I wouldn't catch that if I weren't being present.
Yeah.
And there's times where I still don't catch it. And there's times where I don't get to be present. It's it's not always
Right.
easy.
It's
But
life.
building that muscle, yeah, every chore around the house, everything that you do, if you have the ability and you're not trying to watch a toddler out of the corner of your eye,
Mhm. Mhm.
can be turned into a meditation.
I love that. I love that. Is that a practice that you are engaging, you know, every time you're doing laundry? No. Okay.
Psh, no,
No. Okay. All right.
no,
Because like this is my other
no.
issue is like I feel the need now. It's like I'm searching for an answer for everything. And it's like, okay, now every time I do laundry, I have to meditate. And it's like, oh my God, then it feels like work.
Yeah, no. What I suggest to people who are trying to integrate this into their lives and like build a habit is start with 3 minutes a day. It's 180 seconds, right? And so and then you struggle to find 180 seconds to meditate, to just
Yeah.
be with your thoughts, right? That
Yeah.
feels like a lot. So it can be in the
Yeah.
shower and focus on the water on your skin and the gratitude for the products you're using and how silky they feel, right? For the
Mm-hmm.
steam in your nostrils, whatever the thing is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one day it might be a shower, one day it might be the laundry, the next day it might be putting my feet in the grass for a few seconds while the kid is occupied safely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every day it's likely something different. But if I can get in those 180 seconds a day,
Yeah.
at least I've had just a few moments with myself. And that
Yeah.
comes back too to being like liking myself,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm a pretty cool person. Being
It's
alone
funny
with
how
myself for
important that
3 minutes,
is.
right? Like being alone with
Yeah.
myself for 3 minutes can be enjoyable,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. 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 I know. Or not sometimes.
Or not. It depends
Right.
on where headspace is
Right.
at. Yeah.
Right. I could see sometimes like being like, okay, let me take my 3 minutes and be like, nope, later. Like
Yep.
doing it later. Oh my goodness. All right. So now, you know, how does this all then translate to your business? Not only from a personal point of view of, hey, you're a mom now, you battle depression, like making that work as an entrepreneur, but then also, helping your clients, like who's coming to you, what are they wanting to do and achieve and be.
Well, I mean, the past couple of years, a lot of people have reprioritized,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of people's lives got turned upside down with the way the economy adjusted and with things shutting down for COVID in 2020 and all of that stuff. So a lot of people are coming out with brand new priorities. A lot of people are exploring neurodiversity and mental health. And I've got several people in my life who, for the first time, are actually experiencing depression.
Mm-hmm.
They never had before. And they're coming to me like, man, I feel this, and this. And I'm like, guys, that's depression. What? This is what you deal with? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in my business, so I help businesses scale, right?
Okay.
So I support businesses in growth and scaling in a way that is conscious, and we incorporate spirituality. And then I also teach classes on spirituality. All of it is about scaling, right?
Okay.
Whether it's scaling
Okay.
your awareness of yourself or scaling your awareness of your business.
Mm.
And so it helps to be able to relate. Like
Yes.
I deal with these things myself before I was a mom, even like, I deal with depression. I deal with not wanting to do things. I deal with struggling to find the right boundary with people. Like I'm a human, just like you're a human.
Mm-hmm.
I just happen to have done an enormous amount of study and have a gift for codifying things and making them feel very actionable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and it's not like literally in my contract, but it's part of the contractual conversation with new clients. I am a person who is sometimes inflicted with depressive state. And there may be days where I just no show.
Mm-hmm.
My commitment to you is that I will do that as little as possible. It may never happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
Here is how you make sure I am safe if you are concerned about me. And my request is right. So I have that conversation with them up front, and they get permission to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If they're constantly no showing, that's a whole nother conversation. But on occasion, like you have days where you just can't even, or everything gets away from you and you forget.
Right.
And so we hold space for each other to be human.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't mind rescheduling things. You and I rescheduled this interview a few times because there was a
Right.
bunch of stuff happening in my life. And I was like, I can't even right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Right. So it's being willing to know where my limits are. It's that whole thing of we hear this said often, put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
As somebody who travels a lot, do you know what they say next?
No.
So you can help the people around you.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If I'm not taking care of myself, I can't help my clients. I can't support the other humans I care about. I can't support the entire planet, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I'm just like a big mover and shaker and lover of people. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So anything I learn about taking care of myself, I then enjoy going and teaching it to others and supporting them and finding out what works for them.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't take care of myself, I don't have the energy left to do that for others.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And I think as moms, women, entrepreneurs, those are like three categories of people that are going to naturally, or I don't know if it's naturally, but that do, for whatever reason, struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
The guilt, the shame, the
Mm-hmm.
all the pressure that society, that ourselves, that our peers put on us to, you know, put other people first is really what it is.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of being selfish in order to be selfless. If
Mm.
I don't take care of myself and carve out spaces and times for myself, then I don't have the ability to just sit and be present with my kid, or sit and be present with a client, or sit and be present with a friend in need.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like I go on a solo retreat once a quarter for
Mm-hmm.
at least a couple of nights, 3 if I can get away. I've only done it once since the kid was born,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a big deal. But it will come back, right?
Yeah.
Because I need that time to be alone with myself and let everything process
Mm-hmm.
in order to have the spaciousness with myself,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can be present with the other things that are important in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken a long time to get to where that feels easy to say. And it's taken even longer to get to where that feels like I'm pretty decent at it, like most of the time, half of the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. 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 And you've mentioned it, sort of in passing, and I know from hearing other interviews you've done, you do have an incredible skill for, even something like that, even like being selfish and taking care of yourself, like sort of putting it in almost like list form. Like I'm getting visuals of like you having just endless amounts of Excel spreadsheets, and it's just, I don't know what form it takes for you, but does more or less every aspect of your life like have systems and processes put towards it that you've actually written down, and what the word used, codify, is that?
I don't know if they're all written down. But yes, so in my corporate career, I was a project manager,
Mm-hmm.
among other things. That was what I was really known for, was project managing. And so over time, I have brought that skill. And remember, at the core, I like to control things.
Right. Right.
Right. So
Yes.
like always, our shadow self is finding ways to come forward. And sometimes our shadow self is useful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Survival techniques are useful. Right. So I learned how to be a project manager in order to have a successful career. It was an adaptive skill. And my shadow self loved it because I got to control things.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as I've done the work to heal and feel like I'm in a more healthy, balanced space, I can still use those techniques and that part of myself in the things that feel good. So like it's not super sexy to say, unless you're a control nerd like me. I help people project manage spirituality. I help people project manage their business. I help people project manage self-care and relationships and boundaries, because we're essentially codifying it and figuring out systems and mechanisms that are really actionable for you to take this concept and apply it in your life. We read books and we listen to podcasts and we get all this information,
Mm-hmm.
but if you don't have the muscle around how do I actually take this into my real everyday life, you can just kind of be swimming
Yeah.
in concepts and it piles on, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I seem to have a superpower for helping people make something actionable, and it's really fulfilling for me and it's not difficult for me to do. And so I
Mm-hmm.
love helping other people do it. And that's
Yeah.
that's what I do a lot
Yes.
of.
Someone said to me, I think on a show, that like, you can't just keep collecting self-development. You actually have to hit the mat. I
You got
think
to
it
get on
was,
the court.
yeah, I think it was Amy
Mhm.
Green Smith. She was like, you just can't keep collecting. You got to hit the mat. You got to get to work. And the other thing that came to mind for me was, um, I read a Brene Brown book, and she talks about when you're constantly consuming and not implementing, like everything you've consumed is just a rumor. Like you actually have to try it to know if it
Yeah.
works for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you start that process? Like obviously you don't take me all the way through it from A to Z, but give me an example of like something tangible, actionable that you help someone to do that.
Yeah, sure. One thing I'm becoming known for is pondering prompts. right? So when we're
Okay.
talking about something like I mentioned earlier, Carolyn Mace and the archetypes, right? I offer pondering prompts to my clients and I'll give them in a written form so you could journal about them. But I also do audio files so you can listen to them while walking, while exercising, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to help your brain ponder and process new thought patterns,
Mm-hmm.
because we tend to stay in the same sort of like self-talk, obsessive thinking about, worrying about something. And if we're wanting to build a habit in, for instance, staying present, right? There's a whole series of pondering prompts I can give you that will help you ponder for yourself. What does it feel like when I'm present? What does it feel like in my body when I'm fully present? What does it do
Mm-hmm.
to my nervous system? What is my experience of others? Can I tell when others are fully present with me? And what does that feel like?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'll give you like a whole series of questions to consider that help that shift the way that you think about things and
Mm-hmm.
allow yourself a little bit of focused attention on that topic. And then another example is the list that I share through that article of, what
Mm-hmm.
works for me. I will have other people make lists of what works for them. One of my favorite things to encourage people to do is make a list of joy makers.
Mm-hmm.
Make as long of the list as you can, but like 3 or 4 is totally a legitimate start. But I challenge that everybody probably has like a couple dozen.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be something as simple as the sound of rain on the roof of my car,
Mm-hmm.
the feeling of cashmere on my fingers, the smell of hot chocolate on the stove, right? It can be really small things. It doesn't, people think joy makers and are like, a present,
Right.
going
Cancun.
on vacation.
Yeah.
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 Which is legit. That's legit. And
Yes.
that can make your list. But once you have a long list, and if especially if it's something you continually add to, when you're having moments of feeling blue, down on yourself, shame, like judging yourself or others, like feeling like you're not in the best place, you're not being the best version of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
do a joy maker,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
blow some bubbles, chew some bubble gum that has sugar in it that adults don't usually let ourselves do, but as kids, like juicy fruit was the best gum, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Right? Like give yourself
Yeah.
that moment of
Yeah.
that joy maker. And often that's enough to shift so much of our perspective, right? So it's looking for, depending on what you're dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
right? What is it? And depending on what you've studied, right? What information you've consumed, and figuring out what can we do to get you living that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I'm working towards in all of that, and I wonder your thoughts on it, is I am still in a place where, like, I feel like I don't want to say I'm waiting because I'm so actively working on it, but it's like, it's almost like I'm just waiting for that click moment where all of that feels like second nature. Right now, it still feels like I am like trekking through deep mud. It's like, okay, I gotta do my joy. Like, I wouldn't have called it a joy maker, and I wouldn't, I wouldn't have, I like that. I don't have things tangibly written out, and I really think that would help me. So there are now more things I can do, and it's like, I almost just feel like I'm moving and ultimately not no longer striving for like total happiness all the time, but just striving for the things that I need to do feeling like second nature, feeling like they're part of me, feeling like I don't have to have heaviness around them. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. And I have a few thoughts to share with you. One is I suspect if you took a little bit of time, you could come up with some things that are now second nature that weren't before.
Yeah, you're probably right.
So odds are you've got some celebrations that you could stand to, some
Mm,
acknowledgments for yourself, right? Of like
mhm.
patting yourself, literally patting yourself on the back, giving yourself a high five for the things that you have integrated.
Yeah, you're so right. Yeah.
Um, and I feel like for those of us that are striving for self-awareness, we're striving to like be the best versions of ourselves. We're these curious individuals. There's always something,
Yeah, I know.
right? Like
It's never ending. Yeah.
I'm in ministerial school right now, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm like, I don't understand, and it's so heavy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's this other stuff that I've been studying for 10 years, right?
Mhm.
Like I've been studying Carolyn Mace's archetypes for a really long time. I've been studying astrology from a very practical perspective of like self-awareness development, not like to become an astrologer, for a really long time. And they're all really easy for me now, but I
Mhm.
didn't know that until I went to teach it. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, I was going to teach like a 2-hour class on astrology. And I ended up doing an entire year-long program because I
Wow.
had so much to say about it. Right.
Wow.
So there's always going to be something, because that's probably who you are.
Yeah. Yay.
And and like, I mean, you could take a break, right? You could
Yeah,
stop
I know.
collecting,
I
right? But
know.
then that'd be boring.
I told myself I need to buy a fiction book, like just to like switch it up.
That is a legit great piece of advice to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's time for like some
It-
fantasy world and not like, how are you doing today? Or whatever it is I
yeah,
read all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
for real. And you probably have some celebrations to have.
Yeah. No, you're right. How do you celebrate? Like, are you just like, woo? Or like, what do you do?
It depends on the season and
Okay.
who's around and my mood. But some of the thing, I will do a dance party. I love to
Okay.
watch other people dance. I'm not a very good dancer. So if I'm all by myself, I will turn up the music and dance.
Okay.
For me, I might go to the beach. I live in Florida.
Hmm.
Right. So I'll go spend some time in nature. Sometimes I will enjoy good food. Right.
Mhm.
Like, I often relate to food as fuel, but sometimes I will go and have some good food. Sometimes I do a little retail celebration, right?
Mhm.
Buy
Mhm.
myself a new scarf, or I might dye my hair pink, which it is right now
I
because I
see
felt
that.
sassy,
Yeah.
right?
That's awesome.
And again, it's the same thing. It's very similar to what I was saying earlier, where I think people go really big with it, but it doesn't have to be,
Mhm.
right? Like, sometimes I have a moment where I finish something that I've been like avoiding, those things we don't love to do, but we
Oh
have to
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And then I finish it, and I'll just sit back from my desk and pet the cat for a few minutes and take a few deep breaths and like appreciate how pretty my office is. And then I go back to work. And that was
Mhm.
my celebration.
Yeah. Yeah. And sorry, I made a note because in talking about astrology and all of your interests in what you've studied, when you were talking about shadow self, is that like the birth chart thing with
It
the
could be for,
moon, or what does that mean?
so there's a whole,
I know that's like another like gazillion hour thing that I just
yeah,
opened
it
up.
could be, but to simplify it oftentimes there's the shadow and the light, and the
Okay.
goal is balance. If you live in the light all of the time, that gets boring.
Mm-hmm.
And growth comes from the shadow and from like it's I never actually seek to be happy all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to be content. I want to be well taken care of. I want to be healthy and balanced, and I want experiences of happiness, and I'm open to the experience of sadness,
Right.
because with great love comes loss, right?
Right.
So the shadow self is the idea that it's the parts of you that are holding on to the trauma, the parts of you that are holding on to the shame, the parts of you that are maybe really good at things that you do for survival,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've had a couple of tough periods in my life, and I am really good at schmoozing and manipulating people into what I need them to do in order for me to survive. Sometimes I use that shadow skill, right? That part of myself in business. And my intent is always to use it for good,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
I hear you.
So
Yeah.
it's like, broadly, it's the idea of the opposite of the light, right? The light is like the idealized version of ourselves. And then at the opposite end, we have the part of ourselves that maybe we don't always think of in a positive light.
Okay.
I suggest that they're all amazing because they're all part of you, and they're
Mm-hmm.
all worthy of love and acknowledgement. And sometimes they need healing. And the goal is to live in the middle, right? So you'll
Mm-hmm.
find shadow self-talk in all sorts of different modalities, and all of them will have different definitions. But at the broadest, like highest up view level, it's the idea that it's the part of yourself that maybe you're not always proud of or ashamed of and has healing work to do.
Okay. Okay. Because I recently got my birth chart, and I also like I just recently did all this. I did the birth chart, I did the Enneagram, I did like all the things, and I didn't do them in like this super high level. I got like free versions of all this stuff, but I'm like, it's literally like a sticky note on my desktop that's like all of my things, like Enneagram 3 and this and that. And like, oh, and human design, I did a human design thing. And so like this is like a
Whoa.
whole, this is like maybe a part 2, because I also had a note to talk to you about seasonal alignment and some of the other like just big topics that you talk about that are just too big for the next 3.5 minutes, I think. But could you do what you just did in like a simplified version of for seasonal alignment? Because that one is something I'm very interested in, and I just want to know like the snippet version.
Yeah, sure. So it's the
Well, I
idea
want
that
it. Well, to be clear, I want to know the whole thing, but in the time that we have, the snippet version will suffice for the moment.
no worries, I get it. I feel like we could talk for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So seasonal alignment is the concept that the planet actually gives us a roadmap on how to be moment to moment in order to participate in the cycle of life around us. It can be a little Lion Kingy if we let it. So
Okay.
if we look at the cycle and the wheel of time, right there, we always come back to the beginning. So I look a lot at pagan traditions and pre-Christian traditions and bring those forward. And I like exploring all of that fun stuff. But again, to kind of give you the snippet version, each season has properties, qualities, and energies that it bring with it.
Like
And then
when you say seasons, you mean traditional winter, spring, summer, fall?
winter, spring, summer, fall.
Okay.
Yes. So for example, we are in the middle of summer right now as we're recording this, and summer is masculine in nature, not gender energy, right? So it's masculine nature, and that it encourages us to push for things to happen and to make stuff happen and be very action oriented and like go get them attitude. Summer is all about finding like so summer summer is all
the
I'm a very
accompanying like
physical person.
descriptions with your body are excellent. Yeah.
I'm sorry y'all are missing them.
I know.
So summer is really encouraging us to find sustainable habits and to notice when we're at risk of burnout and to avoid it. Right. So summer is inviting us into a particular exploration on a metaphysical plane of how we choose to be during these months. And we have a whole bunch of cultural influences to consider. There's a bunch of pagan stuff to consider. There's holidays that indigenous people have been celebrating for many moons, like all sorts of stuff. There's moon cycles, all sorts of stuff. But at the highest level, each season has that list of qualities and properties and energies. And if we spend a little bit of time tapping into them and exploring what that means to you as an individual, then there's a way that I encourage business owners to follow the seasons in their cycle. A lot of people do their budget in winter, and I suggest, do your assessment of your business and where you want to go and all of your planning in winter. And in spring, set your budget and start new projects.
Yeah.
Winter is all about incubation. Spring is about the phoenix and the rebirth. Right. So yeah, I don't know, this might be a little woo woo for your listeners, but I channeled, like, I felt like something came through me. Like it wasn't necessarily my own. It was like the universe going, this needs to be out there. So I created an entire year-long program where I have a seasonal alignment kit for every single season.
Wow.
And there's a monthly component. And it's like little 4 and 5 minute videos that go with it. To help people explore this, because it's such an integral part of, and it supports me in my mental health too, because then I feel like I'm not resisting what's around me. I'm going with it. And yeah, it's something we could talk for a long time about, but it's at the simplest level. There's a blueprint around us. And if we tap into it and are in flow with the planet around us and what the nature is doing around us, it can give us a lot of support. And I will say that a lot of my stuff is focused on the Northern Hemisphere, because, we forget that the Southern Hemisphere, it's winter right now. So it's a little bit different for them, but I could talk about it for a long time. It's super juicy stuff.
Yeah. You know what? On the simplest level, what it's making me think of is for, I think it was New Year's Eve, my house, we got COVID. And, here we are, the first week, 2 weeks of the new year. I'm on social media. Everyone's like, new me, new goals, new year. And I had to like actively talk myself through, like, my new year is going to start on January 10th. Like, it's just not, it's not January 1st because we all have COVID and I've got the stomach flu. And it's like, and it made me think, like, who told me it couldn't? Like, who told me my new year couldn't start on July 1st? Like, I don't
Absolutely.
know, Yeah.
Some people like use their birthday, right? In pagan traditions, Halloween is actually New Year's. In some other traditions, the spring equinox is New Year's.
Yeah.
So like it's all because of the Pope Gregory and the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah.
It's because somebody told us to. And really, New Year's resolutions is not in alignment with seasonal energy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a time to be starting big
No,
new things. It's a time to be
honestly,
in
I'm
reflection.
so exhausted in the winter. I'm burnt out from the holidays. Like, I live where it snows. So you're just like naturally limited to some extent. It just feels very, yeah, it doesn't feel very
Mhm.
rebirthy. It doesn't feel very motivating.
And then we
Yeah.
spend time making ourselves wrong because we're not doing more and
Yeah. We
getting to the
feel
gym
bad.
and doing all these. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what if you were to go into winter going, I'm going to journal, I'm going to read books,
Hmm.
I'm going to do this new practice that I've been wanting to do, I'm going to cozy up with hot chocolate with my kids. And,
Hmm.
you took on that that's what you were going to do instead of resisting.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
frees you up in a really big way if you let it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Um, Anything based on the conversation we've had, anything else that's on your mind, on your heart that you want to share, anything you want to leave people with before we sign off?
I guess just some commiserate because we started here. So to come back to it, some commiseration that in the US, especially, the systems are stacked
Oh,
against us
yes,
getting
we never went
support
back
in
to
mental
this. Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just, I don't have any magic solutions, but I just, I think a lot of people are drawn to your show because of dealing with their own mental health stuff. Right.
Hmm.
So just like reiterating again, you're not alone. It is really hard and it sucks.
Yeah.
And our system is not set up to support us in getting the mental health support we need. And I don't have a magic solution for you,
Hmm.
but know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And I really hope you don't give up
Yeah.
because there are people out there. There are different methodologies and like you'll find the thing if you keep searching, but it
Hmm.
may not be Western medicine
Hmm.
as much as that is really crummy, but
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
we're at right now. So just some commiseration.
Love it. Always
Mm.
helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sunny, thank you so much. I'm probably going to send you an email about doing another one of these about, kind of maybe deep diving that seasonal alignment, getting into astrology. Like, I'm super into that. And I've not really, like taken the deep dives on the show yet, but I want to. So, anyway, thank you for your time today and for sharing so much. It was really great talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
All right. So, if you have been around here for a while, you were probably also perking up anytime Sunny mentioned something that I've talked about a lot before on the show, like walking outside to the mailbox, the feeling of things piling on when depression hits, and not that you would know this, but the Sesame Street code word. Like, how crazy was that? Anyway, I appreciate Sunny so, so much for taking time with me and in her writings for other outlets to describe what depression feels like. I had an aha moment for myself in this conversation, and it's that my goal in finding the most accurate description of what depression feels like was always about trying to help those who don't experience it to the level that some of us do to understand. But in hearing Sunny talk and in listening to it back, I realized truly just how much value there is in hearing what depression feels like for someone else, for those of us who know. There's value in hearing someone put words or a photo or a movie scene to describe your experience. Sunny talked about, the sunken place from the movie Get Out. And for me, I remember watching the show Made on Netflix. There is an episode, or maybe it's even a couple of episodes, where the catalyst is the baby daddy gives her car away, and the initial scene shows her slipping into a depression by sinking lower and lower into the couch. And at first, I honestly thought, whoa, is this taking like a sci-fi turn? I didn't expect that. What is happening here? But obviously, as it continues to show that this is her in a depressed state. And the more I watched, the closer to home it felt. I also immediately thought whoever wrote this has had this experience before, which I know isn't revolutionary information. Writers do that a lot, but I don't know. It's just funny when you see something on the screen that feels so personal. You know it's not personal, but it is. That's, I guess, what makes a great writer. So, all right. So anyway, it just speaks to the importance of all of our desire to be seen, heard, and validated. So while I want others who don't know what depression feels like to try to understand, to create a more empathetic world, there's also just, value to be had in those of us who can commiserate. So I hope that Sunni and I were able to see, hear, and validate you today, or to give you some clarity on what it feels like for a loved one to battle depression. I am sure we will hear more from Sunni on this show in the future. In the meantime, go check her out, her website, and her social platforms. Thank you, Sunni, so much for your time. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.